Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time I'm going to show you how to set up a virtual machine. What's that, you cry? Well, a virtual machine allows you to run one operating system inside another. So for example, you might be running Windows but you want to run a Linux distribution as well, or you might be running a Linux distribution and you want to run Windows inside of that. And that's what a virtual machine allows you to do. So let's go and see how this is achieved. So here we are on a Windows 10 desktop where I'm going to install some virtualization software which will allow one or more virtual machines to share this computer. However, before we get started, it's important to make sure our hardware here is capable of running a virtual machine, as the computer's processor, RAM and other resources will be divided between the host operating system, what we've got here, Windows 10, and the virtual or the guest operating systems we're going to install. Now here I've got on my test rig, I've got 8 GB of RAM and I've got a quad-core processor, so things will work here perfectly well. And you should be okay if you've got, say, 4 GB of RAM and a dual-core processor. But if, for example, you've got 2 GB of RAM and a single-core processor, you'll almost certainly run out of resources if you try to set up a virtual machine. The second thing to note is that since about 2006, many PCs have included hardware support for virtualization, for creating virtual machines, a technology Intel call VTX, and which AMD call AMD-V. And when setting up a virtual machine, it's a good idea to activate hardware support if possible, and you can do this in your PC's BIOS. Now, exactly how you do this will depend on your particular computer, but here, for example, I pressed the delete key during boot to enter this rather old-fashioned looking BIOS screen, but it works perfectly well. And here I've selected Advanced BIOS Features and Virtualization, which I've changed from Disabled to Enabled. And then of course I've gone back to Save and Exit Setup and the machine has rebooted. So with all that done, we're back as we were on this Windows 10 desktop. So to actually install a virtual machine, we need some software to actually enable virtualization. And there's various options available. There's lots of packages that will do this. One which is very popular is VMware, but we're not going to use that. I'm going to use a piece of software here from Oracle called VirtualBox. This is free, this is open source, it's got some great online documentation, so this is a great place to start and indeed to finish if you want to set up virtual machines. So what we need to do is to download it, and you can see it's got a nice big download box there, can't really miss that. And we need to download, because I'm on a Windows machine here, for Windows host, so I'll click on that and we'll save that down there. And there we are, that's downloaded. And I'm also going to download here the Oracle's VirtualBox extension pack, which we'll just click on there to download that. Now what this does is, as this is a sort of effectively a plug-in for the package, this gives us various sort of features. In particular, it adds support for USB 2 and USB 3 and for webcams to feed through from your host PC. So it's quite useful to have this, so I thought we'd get that while we're here. And that also seems to have downloaded now. That took a little while, but I whittled on, so it was fine. So now we should find I have those ready. Oh, as if by magic everything is waiting for us. So we can now in theory just run these to install stuff. So VirtualBox will just do that. And I'll just click on next. This will be a straightforward install, I think. This is a very simple thing to do. Yes, we'll do all of that. There we are, install. Yes, indeed. And I'm not going to start now because I'm going to finish that off, and I'm now also going to install this extension pack. So I'll just click on that, and which has launched VirtualBox for us anyway. So we'll click on install, there we are, and we'll go all the way down presumably and go I agree, yeah, that's marvellous, and yes, we'll put that in. And there we are, that was installed successfully. So we're now ready to actually set up a virtual machine. So here I am back again. Since I saw you last, I've done a bit of rescaling on my desktop so you can hopefully see the fonts in what I'm going to show you a little bit better, but basically nothing else has changed. So I'll run up VirtualBox and we're back to where we were at the end of the last segment. And what I'm going to do here is to create a virtual machine and install inside it Linux Mint. But before I do that, we'll just look at the preferences here in the VirtualBox. And the defaults here are pretty good for us. We haven't got to worry about things like that. It takes care of everything very well these days in these systems. All options there to play with if you wish to, but I am just going to take updates down to maybe once every couple of weeks rather than every day. And I'm going to go in general, I'm going to change the default machine folder. This is where our virtual machine files will be stored. These can be very big files. So here I'm going to set that to a different drive. On this PC I've got an SSD which is getting fairly full and a larger file which is generally used for video which is not so full. So I'm going to put all my virtual files in there and just set that up. Will make life a bit easier rather than having to set that directory all the time. Anyway, that's set now. I'm now going to therefore click on New to create a virtual machine, and it's going to be a Linux Mint machine. You can call it what you like, but if you call it something sensible, the program will help you out. And you'll see here it's actually worked out it's going to be a Linux machine, and it says it to be based upon the Ubuntu 64-bit, which is what Linux Mint is based on. There isn't an option here for Linux Mint, but the Ubuntu 64-bit will work absolutely fine. So that's cool. So we'll just next on that. We can then set the amount of memory we'll give this virtual machine. It's given it 1 GB by default. I'm going to give it 2 GB, I think, because I'm just thinking a little bit better. And we're now going to create a virtual hard drive where we're going to store this operating system. It's taking 10 GB. I think that's enough to kick us off. I think that'll be okay. We'll create that. Yes, a VirtualBox disk image is fine. And we'll use a dynamically allocated drive, which means it won't take 10 GB initially. It'll take up to 10 GB, but only use what it requires at a particular point in time. So that's fine. File size and location, the name of the drive is going to be Linux Mint. That's absolutely fine. And there we are. We've now created a virtual machine. That was nice and fast, wasn't it? So that virtual machine's got nothing on it. So when we boot it up, it obviously can't run an operating system, and it'll run a wizard to allow us to install one. So if I double click it, bring the thing up, it'll run that little wizard in a second. There we are. And we can now pick a file which has got an operating system on it. Now, we could use a real CD drive or DVD drive, but I'm going to use an ISO file based upon a drive. And if we go here, you'll see I've got sitting in another folder some ISOs of different operating systems. Here's one for Linux Mint. So I'll just select my ISO there and open. And effectively, we will boot from that as if we'd written it, say, to a USB drive to boot from, and it'll boot up. As you can see, it's now running effectively Linux Mint in this virtual machine, and it's still running Windows over here perfectly happily. And the way, for example, the mouse moves across the two is very clever. This is really, really good software, VirtualBox. I really like this. So hopefully that will boot up in a second. And yes, here we are running Linux Mint, which is cool. Hasn't been installed yet. It's just simply come off as if it had booted, say, from a DVD or USB drive. We'll get rid of that message as we know it's not perfect. It's a virtual machine after all, but we are running, Linux and Windows side by side. I find that amazing. Anyway, let's now install Linux Mint as we would if we had just come in from a USB drive. We'll just click on that, and we'll have to go to the normal process here. This is a standard operating system install now. It's just installing to a virtual drive. I won't put all the third-party stuff in and download all that just to speed things up here. This is a test after all. We get to this message, erase disk and install Linux Mint. Don't worry about that. This is not deleting off your real drive. This is the virtual drive we created just for this purpose. You can't do damage if it's on a virtual machine. That's the whole point. Install now. And it'll just check that because programs like to check. And it'll go on doing that lot. Yes, I'm in London. Anything else you would have asked me to do? Oh yes, it's going to ask me about keyboards and stuff. And hopefully now it'll get on actually doing the install. I have to put some details in. It's a weak password, it's only a test, and we'll continue with that. And that'll hopefully now finally get on and doing the install. You might be thinking to yourself, where did you get the file from to use to install Linux Mint? If you're thinking that, we'll flick back into Windows and we'll go to the Linux Mint website. And I got this particular ISO from going to download on the Linux Mint website. And it's actually Linux Mint Cinnamon. I'm actually installing 64-bit. I got it from there, and if we clicked on any of these mirrors, I'm not actually going to do so, but we'll open one up, it will save the file. I'm actually using a slightly older version of Linux Mint as a file, have it lying around rather than installing a new one, taking all that to download, but that's where I got my ISO file from. Anyway, that will close down. We don't need Windows. We'll let Linux Mint continue to install, and we'll speed through that and hopefully it gets there rather quickly. And here we are, installation has finished, and we might as well restart now to finish everything off. And of course, remember that's not restarting the computer, that's restarting the virtual machine. Windows will continue running perfectly happily here, but the virtual machine is rebooting. You will get to this point where it says remove the installation medium and press enter. We can simply press enter because there isn't a real medium in. And here we are, we're actually running Linux Mint booted from the virtual drive on this machine. And it seems pretty happy. There we are, it is running here. Note down the bottom you can see how that shows how it's accessing the disk, and you can do various settings down here. So for example, it's got a live network connection, but if you wanted to, we could disconnect the network adapter. So this will be isolated from the internet if we wanted to do that, or we can connect it back up again. If we wanted it connected, there we are, have a little flick around. Oh, it's just noticed I disconnected it. Catching up with me, it's probably going to notice I've connected it now as well. So we can also resize this window. I'll say a bit more about window resizing later, but that's very clever, the fact it'll work out what's going on and hopefully catch up with us and just continue working. Very, very good. Menu is working there. That's absolutely fine. We could launch a program. We could launch a calculator. This is a working version of Linux Mint. Oh, 9 times 4. Oh, it's 36. That's handy. And we can get to the web. It should be running the web browser. We know it's got an internet connection down there. Everything is just working. I think this is a really, really cool example of how fantastic this VirtualBox technology is. It's gone to its own web browser. Let's close that down. So there we are, we've managed to run Linux Mint in VirtualBox, and we can even close it down using its own close down thing there, shut down the computer, shuts down the virtual machine, shut it down, and we'll come back to where we started. Right, here I am back again, and I've just spent a very happy hour or so finding out my Windows XP disks and installing Windows XP on another virtual machine here in VirtualBox. And here it is. Here's Windows XP with, remember old My Computer under Windows XP, and been playing a game of Patience here, which seems to have kind of stuck now, but never mind, we had a lovely time playing that. And I've still got running down here, look, we've still got Linux Mint running as well, so I've got Linux Mint and Windows XP, and of course this is all running on a machine where the host operating system is Windows 10, all running together. I find this very exciting. Now, just want to tell you about a few other things. There's lots of settings you can play with in VirtualBox. It's a really good piece of software, as I said already. If you select a particular operating system, you can go to Machine and go to Settings, and you've got control of everything here, all the storage and the audio, network, all this kind of stuff. If you want to twiddle with things, you can to make it work just as you want to give the permissions to the things it should have and the things it shouldn't have. One thing I must mention though in this video is what is called the host key, which is a key you can use to get control back to the host operating system if you can't do that directly out of the guest operating system. So in these systems, things are working very well. The mouse goes straight across. Here, the mouse is being emulated under Windows XP, and we're moving across, and it's now running under Windows 10. That's very clever. Potentially, the mouse could get caught. So to get out of that, you'd use the host key. You'd press the host key. So if we look under File and Preferences, and we go to Input and Virtual Machine, you'll see the host key is initially set to right control. And that's absolutely fine if your keyboard has got two control keys, a right and left control key. But some keyboards only have one control key, particularly on laptops and smaller keyboards. So do check that is set to something you can access before you start playing around with these systems, particularly if you want to go full screen. So for example, if I go back to Linux, you can go full screen by pressing the host key and F, so the control key and F here, and it'll show us a little window, will tell us what's about to happen. We know that's going to happen. Don't show again. And there we are. We've now got Linux Mint running as a full screen. So we really are running a Linux just on the machine. It's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? And if we want to get out of that, the control F again brings us out. Doesn't work quite as well on older operating systems. There's a lot you think about it's been having to work here. If I do control F on the Windows XP, we'll just get in the middle of the screen, but I still like that. We could still continue our game of Patience, couldn't we? Which I don't think is going to go anywhere. And control F to get us back out again. But it shows why you have to have that key available. The other thing I just want to point out to you is there's different ways you can close down machines. Now here, and what I did in my last segment was to go to close something down by using the shutdown button. Here I'll close down Windows XP. It'll turn it off. Oh, we had a little noise there of Windows XP, hope you heard that, and it'll shut itself down and quietly go away as it has. However, you can also shut down a system by using the standard dialog to close a window, and then you've got options. You can send a shutdown signal, which is just like closing the machine down. You can use power off the machine, which you really shouldn't, that's like pulling the plug out. Or you can save the machine's state, which means if you want to, you can be running an operating system, open loads of programs, all that kind of thing, and then shut it down and come back to it exactly as it was. So to show you that, let's just go here and we'll run up what's nice and simple. We'll just run up the calculator just to be doing something and put some numbers in it. There we are. And if I now shut this thing down and said save machine state and OK, and wait a second while it does that, and there we are, it's finished. And if I now go back to Linux Mint and open it again, you'll see we've come back to exactly as we were. So you have all sorts of things you can do with virtual machines. They allow you to have test environments, but they also allow you to literally save a snapshot of what you're doing and come back to it, and potentially a copy of that and all sorts of other stuff. So virtual machines, as you're probably guessing from my presentation, are a very exciting and very cool thing. It allows you to do all kinds of useful things with computers. Right, I just thought I'd finish off with this segment making it clear you can install VirtualBox on a Linux system. So here I am in Linux Mint, where I've gone into the software manager and installed VirtualBox, and here it is. So here we've got Linux as the host operating system, and I've installed a couple of virtual machines with guest systems, one of which, as you can see, is a Windows XP, which is running up there. I haven't even turned off its standard skin. I haven't even gone to classic as I normally do, but we could run, I don't know, what did we run last time? We ran Solitaire, didn't we? So let's run Solitaire again, which has got some more interesting colours here. And again, we could try playing a game of Solitaire. Looks like that will work. So anyway, I will get on with playing Solitaire, which is really serious business. But you hopefully have had proved to you in this video how you could install VirtualBox on both a Windows system and a Linux system to help you set up and run virtual machines. Virtual machines can be very handy indeed if you want occasional access to another operating system or to many different other operating systems, or if you want to set up a safe test environment. Also, virtual machines can be very handy if you want to test out new operating systems, things you won't want to fully install, but you want to see what they can do. And indeed, I'll be using a virtual machine to test out some other alternative operating systems in future videos. But now that's it for this time. If you've enjoyed what you see there, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.